Hello, America, world. This is breaking news regarding the Trump stories in the news, and all the other topics in the news have roles with this. And there are cover ups because originally and still the interbranch were backed into and as identities after they had roles with predicate acts. For example, with the short words and themselves and others were actually capable of discerning. See, but that was instead effectively employed by the breaching method to have each country's own people sense and discern uses of pseudoscience wherein how black people's whites of eyes and the breaching method that assigned slavery find other things others themselves at the same time to be blamed for the cause and causes and keeps and people who want to debate this, they're using qualities, aspects, and natures of debate that are reliant upon things mentioned. For example, Cruz mentioned in the video with Judge Napolitano regarding all that's unfolding in the news and regarding Trump and legal cases. See, there is something called the hyper evidential, which I never read about this, but nature shows us that. For example, how there are five distinct identities of order as times value, as the value of for the first identity of order is the value of truth as it actually was, even if everyone agrees to believe or other, even if they all believe it. If it was not true as it was itself, as a system better than perfect, it will demonstrate to us with negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, the causes of them, and or and so we then there's the order of the finite, the smallest finite detail, and there's the order of the active, and there is the order of the progressive, defined as the extent of the future that we know is true always. It, only to an extent, though, and and it comes with the extent we know is not. We know we don't know about of the future, but if we're honest about that, and the other four of the five connected identities of sequence slash simultaneous nature, it comes with revelations, and they also are manifest with where and how it shows you. One identity of hyper simultaneous is non-distinctly and is simultaneously itself, distinctly from a part of itself, three parts of itself that are also hyper simultaneous. Where and how it is too finite to mix with temporary, but it has and it is mixed anyway, temporary finite, temporary is lasting. In other words, and that is the value of truth as it was itself, as it actually for and the relativity of it. So already it showed the branches of government how they painted themselves in corners with logic and with distinction, with exceptions, and exception nature. So, for example, each of the sciences names and their employment, they're motivated because of the roles also of the value nature systems having been employed by a breaching method to measure and maintain who would become an I or be an identity of independence or unity, other than it needed all identities of unity and independence voicings, pretending to be legitimate simultaneously for how it screens rolls with itself. Back in the day, before the kids had, see, this is multi-front against each age of correlation nature, no matter where the species volume is. This came from semi ancient times. Force try to persuade people to defend and use their names and or other people's names, including as country. Tactical terror, how they could do that and then go back and defend. before they have to discern the quality of fact, human nature, as it is properly. There are three natures of short words that are connected, and, and because of its identity of relativity with everything, its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that being three volume sciences, distinctly, non distinctly, simultaneously how we are physics, metaphysics, mind, and identity as three distinct, non-distinct, and or there is the phenomenon of the hyper-evidential being recorded. My name is Anthony Wall and have a programming method that uses lists, not leaving out the significance of the hyper-evidential. For example, that and how it is an only increasing value to understand why and how America's founders had to counter-extort the other founders, which does not include the founders who were Native Americans. They had to counter-extort their own, and they had to hide their motivations with that. The only way this was even possible was to counter-extort at 13 locations within more than 13 colonies. They're already suits and ties, counters to themselves, incapable of defending their uses of their own names or other people's, or descriptions of their own emotions or others, or the value of that. No, because emotions serve a function by nature, so we can discern the slightest detail. Is showing that we're not using nature system. Oh, but that's a person. That's one. They're not gonna answer you. They have to answer me. That's mandated law. See, they're in the background making up things and changing what we say. They're being dishonest about when we speak clear, and dishonest about when we speak not clear. And they're more because they already lied about their motivation for the uses of everyone's kids and everyone around everyone other ways too, neighbors, etc. Everywhere. This method leaves out foreign bodies, even though they're overtly slash individually grouped and together being used. In other words, there they need to deal with this too, but everyone leaves it out, so that's all they think is left out. And you guys left out the breaching method, which also used remotely all names of groupings of humanity. NATO, North American Free Trade Agreement, for example, it's a guise of our name. Through our own schools, we have people teaching other for our founders than they communicated for us to be taught. They pretend people don't have evidences. Then they just make descriptions of people's what they said. So our courts have been rolls with names in all sides of criminal and of civil cases, and their victims, and courts appointed victims advocates and their doctors in the courts forging, switching names, sticking fake evidences into the databases, and when not them, differentially other intelligence tied to them, including with prisons tied to them further, and other database relationships and investigations investigators constantly on because this breaching of the cause negative very nature progressions acts of natures to employ them to be blamed on other things, others themselves, rather than on itself, the breaching method, if you don't want to call it a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise. Because we can discern needs to draft statutes and syntax more capable than that speaking for wars. Geneva Convention. Oh, let's debate. You guys left out the breaching method. You guys left out in our faces, individually grouped and together. Uses of that's our news. You know, maybe the health of food is not good. That's how we do. We call it. They're preventing an individual voice from being free. Only an individual can defend the order of the finite. And also all kinds of natures of hyper-evidential means to discern the hyper-evidential. This programming method uses lists and uses identities, values slash value progression, and why and how the verb. We need more than one name because this is about the hyper-invisible but still discernible. There are five distinct identities of possession over everything, coming to, from, as, with, and for each subject. or each group subjects. And either that too will have individual, finite, group, and simultaneous value with relativity. The simultaneous is relativity. If someone leaves out the significance or the value of why and how we have black pupils and white survives with their reasoning about serious subjects like slavery, let alone the breaching method at the same time. If they leave one about or the same time, they're getting over on the sequence simultaneous. What what correlation knows instantly? If they're getting over on the value of sequence, true. What happened first? See, there are intelligence families, intercities, where and how they were raised as victim predators slash hyper victim, hyper predators, told to blame other things, others, themselves for slavery. Because this method measured and maintained the adults sickly distinctly from the kids, blaming other things, others, themselves, where it knew nature would show us the answers. It employed the appearance of other motivations, nature's needs, and that's self-valued by others. How it just happens to be. You know, these people have these and appears the only thing. So, for example, there are agencies that influence the social companies the same way. Recently, my posts, they just disappeared when I posted. And it said 23 hours, you can't post. So and know how in the YouTube video with the Trump subjects, which are simultaneously president subjects, chief subjects slash chief subjects, which are simultaneously elections subjects, which is simultaneously elections location slash S usage, use slash S. This breaching method has uses of elections in America and every modern country has uses of when they fight and they're, this is our job. Well, so we'll call it nation building or democracy. That's how they fight as fact treatment nature, leaving out the significance of the means of this to discern how nature would have had us counter properly. Things like predicate acts methods. So the courts have roles with the news all at the same time with names in criminal and civil cases, and and victims and their advocates and their lawyers and their sources, and with the interbranch switching and forging names as people are individually grouped and together, involved with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. Well, a whole bunch of fakes speak about mental health, and no one's looking what's in those locations. There are overt criminal enterprise, private ones, and people that are having verbal arguments where we could have, and they're changing what's communicated between everyone, and they're faking it more and more. So then they torture people because then the people around everyone aren't going to want to continually stay locked in a fake conversation with with other people's business. They're making people involved, or they're asking questions criminally. There are ways originally and still to ask questions also, so while simultaneously distinctly from how hyper criminally, because this uses other motivations apparent to hide behind, and vertically and horizontally. There are people I never had anything to do with on campuses who plant little fake exceptions, and with people I don't know at all, like a Joshua Julian, who's one of the ones involved with forensics locations and with police departments regular, intercities with the same house involved with wire crimes with them, and with their extended family members further involved with child defenders, leaders of the kids before they were caught, forcing that while it was caught. I caught them recorded with that. They're pretending other was recorded. They've been doing this. They've been using the fact that people go into those to get forced for mental evaluations to lie about what caused that, to lie about fake conversations with the people there as evidence is being used by courts. And then so note that the judge Nepal says, oh, in the case we could have they could ask any kind of question to bring up the character of the people. If they do that and pull a trick off with a jury, See, the juries are also, there are a whole bunch of ways to the recorded, they seat the juries in criminally foreign influence ways as people involved with the difference too between, because it's this is breaching method made roles self-valued with no one wanted self-valued roles with, and their motivations are regardless. That's why I used their more needed them to express that, because then you're screening its motivations more than any other motivation. Roles with slavery were the breaching method, the one at the back of the whip, of the whipper too. Oh, and it's screened through other identities, therefore names and the uses. So, in other words, we don't leave out how and why our founders had to counter extort the other founders and simultaneously hide their motivations for that. Then you have conversations with people. They ask you, they give you a ink blotter test in the place of responding to mandated law properly. That's one of the ways that Christina Sioka is involved with names next to the campuses in West Hartford, also with teachers on them, and medical, involved with child offenders, including sexual and medical and drugs and overt criminal enterprises at the same time. They're not legitimately with unmarked police forms, involved with doctors tied to her that are attaching people to fake conversations with themselves. Increasingly, their roles with names on off the spots in Wethersfield, Connecticut, like all along Church Street, involved with natures of identity theft, fraud, slander, federal evidences, crimes with Wethersfield police and other police departments and their family members. Increasingly, as people involved with Hartford Hospital's campus since its inception, involved with torture, slavery, tactically delusions wrought, and criminally foreign influence, fact, cheap nature, quality, aspects, and natures associated with it, and with medical locations across the world, speaking for mental health. See that tied to everyone's, of course, it's mental. You guys are losing truths for lies. You're allowing other people to, and you're allowing to screen more of the uses of that, because they also have countries grouped. You hear them using North American Free Trade Agreement, trade, World Trade Center. They have roles with all kinds of natures of organized crime uncharged, and where people are making value treatments and leaving out exceptions, how we were forced to be in the economy. Our founders left us that for that, our hyper evidential too. So we have to discern the hyper evidential. The identity of space / existence is so distinctly, non distinctly, and simultaneously, and further hyper simultaneously, so we can discern this. So the participle natures, the present participle, and the past participle. The gerund is constantly with a value as a present participle, but it is variably a past participle. And don't forget, in other words, the value only increasing of what actually came first. And that's not just that everyone was mean against the colonists and the Native Americans. It's not just that they get it through them, through the colonists more. And, Native Americans against Native Americans, and the difference, the unities and similar with the things, all that tied to what defenses of syntax, what unity means, what independence means. Everything's about the simultaneous / hyper simultaneous. Nature shows us this. So you guys want to fight with and then call people's names psychological, lie about our evidences. You guys have roles with wire crime acts and methods with the courts involved with election crimes in Wethersfield through time, with their uses of the location /s, and with their uses of databases where they're consolidated to roles with it and fake motivations at other locations, as roles with corners of streets and buildings, where, in other words, they're already being and have been used remotely. Criminally foreign influence leading up to the World Trade Center attack in that context and since. Now all these people want to talk about their motives. I don't know them all, like this Joshua Julian, involved on the Facebook pages of the campuses, lying about their motivations. And I caught him with a principal child abuser. He's involved with some home break-ins in my area. Also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed on Facebook when I caught him switching his narratives about fake ties to me, fake nature that ties to me. And these are also people involved with the family, with the extended family members further involved with the principal child abuser, and Whiting's forensics through time. And foreign and domestic military like that, easier than they use criminally foreign influence. They let them speak. All whisper Greek, Greek. See, president slash chief. We have decipher here. We have the hyper evidential to use. It answers all our questions. All of us go by. The only reason we don't agree about it is because people are jumping in our conversations or getting away of criminal foreign influences, of their fake integrity, of our name side, our side's names. They're putting and they're getting away with it because they're putting us to fake and change communications with each other, and then lying, everyone lying about what they think about it when we use their names or don't in the background. So they should fear God for playing these games with the people that went to the schools that everyone went to, and where and how they use the corners of bill. They fake. They made fake exception. Tim O'Brien, for example, I had no communications in with him one time. He said his parents are police, and then in other words, I'm and then so he could do a truth for a lie, and make fake ties to me, fake natures of ties to me on and off campuses. These are people roles with wire crime acts and methods that involve also their conversations with where they walk on the streets and have conversations with people, and their roles with wire crime acts and methods with the police departments. At the same time, with other police departments juxtaposed with them, and programs and natures of people with the intelligence community. I'm using the word intelligence community. I want you to understand that it has three branches of government and has exceptions and exception nature tied to that. But this is also nature uses exception nature, ways hyper additional from any ways we could invent, finite, grouped, or together. In fact, it has three identities of possession, 1/3/5 identities of possession as itself, as the cell body, cell nucleus, cell wall /S, and those two other identities of appreciation, positive or negative, for gases in their and water. Here, I teach us clear / hyperclear. Everything else has stayed criminal insidious as natures of positives in collusions with the overt negative. So how would they be more? Oh, they say have these killers effectively used to self-value roles with where knowns, unknowns, and that which is discovered and uses of that, reactions to that's measured and maintained. Whose collusions, whose self-value roles with the breaching method influence 6 sciences and campuses A through Z, and reception of that where nature shows us that, which is our other location. The identity, the ground's identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that was tactically denatured for the torture of and for the extortion of our founders. And we're going to treat this honestly. We're also going to use the fact treatment nature slavery, which came along with prevented this from being discerned by keeping fakes speaking while pretending other. All exceptions and exception nature are in demonstration of the same thing. They can't speak about who's good or bad. You should see how they describe little kids. And this is all that's ever heard. Like in the cities. What do you think is going to happen? And then, there's the parents. Their parents came through that rat trap that wants to be called a rat trap so they could call them, they're doing something wrong. They call someone a rat. What are they hiding? That's what they, in other words, we have to get words and stuff like that because there's also their perception. Then let's go have a jury find out. They're out of their minds. They have the intelligence community using remotely, differentially. Sometimes sometimes it's the intelligence communities like FBI directors, Robert Luskin, James Comey, involved with the Britain Superior Court's names, judges and prosecutors, even black and white female judges involved with timed collusions with Facebook, rape threats, names, and KKK themed, Confederate flag themed, and black themed military police forms. And uses of databases, criminally foreign influence, uses of location /S, criminally foreign influence, uses of timing, covering up sequence shifts, the relativity of them. See the relativity of how the beginning of the Old Testament says, Only right up to here, where the names of the sciences will come together. That's all someone has to know. Then the beginning of the Old Testament says all someone has to do is be honest. Are you going to agree to call the identity the hyper simultaneous, which that's my, the identity of hyper simultaneous. It's my transliteration of a English transliteration of the Quran. It says all that someone has to agree to call it Allah or not. You know what I'm saying? And it says to love the people that too that don't do it as long as they're honest. It doesn't say, oh, you have to do the rest of the people who are going to defend those books out of sequence when they're speaking for their own passions and emotions or other people's. Like when then they want to debate with people, you guys leave out what came first. You can't defend that and afford to discern how computers work, valuing the order of the seat of the valuing the what came first. See, but this is where they're planting fake things, and then, in other words, all investigators, they were shown these to self values haven't been. And the difference between that overt criminal enterprise and private ones, forgiveness is to not let the different groups, and note the phrase groupthink also involved with the Fox News, MSNBC, and CNN reported what I mentioned before about Donald Trump's Rumsfeld with the knowns and unknowns. But see, this comes also with with what's discovered, like not just the World Trade Center attack, and after it was discovered. In the process of that discovery, is effectively used to measure and maintain that the collusions weren't discerned, but they were recorded. This includes how our sides rolls with this. These are names who had roles with all sides in criminal and civil cases before, in the context of the World Trade Center, in the Ninth Circuit Court next to it, and since it, as the names involved with predicate acts at each campus I went to with connections between it made for them. And they're lying about how why I have to, and others have to use other people's names, and increasingly leave them out because of their uses of making confessions through statements too, which is why and how. Like, for example, on all sides of Central Connecticut State University and other campuses, there are names involved with New Britain courts and Hartford courts that plant evidences and make confessions through people through, where they use investigations. Investigators use everything and everyone around them to cover up lie progressions, put fake motivations because they had roles of predicate acts when they were kids, intercities connected. Central Connecticut State University in New Britain, Connecticut had roles of predicate acts with Wethersfield campuses when I was a kid. And now, then with a principal child abuser forcing it, and since, and it involved teachers, including with the intelligence community at the campuses, intercities connected to Central Connecticut State University and to Trinity College, and to the uses consciously of the difference between roles with organized crime acts there and worse than war crimes, and not at the locations next to it involved with the same names. Like people, in other words, and uses of their connections between the names next to Central Connecticut State University and Trinity College, who have timed roles with overt criminal enterprises and private ones with Wethersfield interbranch family members and people tied to them. And it's nothing personal. These are fakes who can't that's why they've been using Facebook to lie about what's actually and hide what's actually recorded. The Wethersfield State Judicial Branch offices has confirmed on Facebook people with the name Fienza and people with the name Mendez, people with the name Domain, as intelligence families involved with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, Thaddeus Skarbowski, Dominic Lapriato, their neighbors, John LeConte, the teachers of his daughter, her friends, involved with foreign and domestic medical families on Church Street in Old Wethersfield, on off Webb House, roles with criminally foreign influence uses of the conversations regarding what to name it, regarding American history, tactically delusions, or how they even get away with debating what's not debatable. So, in other words, the truth can be used for a lie. For example, if someone gave something that's wrong because they don't have research, that could be true. But see, that's not a premise of the person's speech. That's not a premise of the person's argument. They're changing what is said. Oh, but I didn't understand it. See, we have little punks with reality here, and people type the databases. No, I self promote boxings. I teach those things. So everything, the definitions are being measured and maintained. Right, criminally foreign influence readings of them and summaries of such. Every word, put the preface hyper before it and nature after it. Nature is a word we could use to appreciate how identity is relative to, and why simultaneously, why identity is relative to positive and negative simultaneously, the same way values are. Again, nature uses values, nature being the identity that is hyper invisible, but still discernible, is why reason has to appreciate. That's what we're appreciating when we appreciate the 5 names of the verb and how the infinitive, no, infinite or finite, you know, infinite with the in this word, the root. I don't know if it's a word, the root of the word finite, but infinite is also like the root of the word. Infinitive, another name for a verb, but it's about a fifth. There's only 5, 1/3/5 ways it's grouped. All exceptions in exception nature that appear to be a demonstration of other come simultaneously with how it's using exception in exception nature. For example, note how the present participle and the past participle are both about time. And note how all kinds of different definitions on English grammar, they have the same sentence to explain it. A gerund, for example, I mean not a gerund, a participle, a present participle, which is a gerund. A present participle is always formed by adding ing to a verb, and a gerund is an ing verbal inflection of a verb. It's not just an inflection; it's its identity, where value is equals that part of its identity. Everyone has a part of their identity simultaneously greater than and more finite than their physical body, and it is relativity to what is active, also in ways that we have no control of, even though we do. We could ignore the nature system that is positive to it and about the identities of positive, its identity of relation to itself. And the difference between, for example, criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments and negative treatments. Also, for example, the difference, how and why there could be and were relative to the subjects like slavery, how positive treatments as criminal insidiousness natures could be in collusion with people with negative syntax nature, regarding if this is about communication. So even if they're quiet killer, they could be and were in collusion with the difference of that too, because they have descriptions of the array and exceptions used to measure and maintain quality of fact treatment nature as collusions, which really causes negative value nature progressions action nature. In New York City, like for example, the suburbs were designed to cause negative value nature progressions action nature. People rely upon the only means to cause positive value nature progressions action natures to be reliant upon criminal insidiousness natures of positive value nature progressions, acts, and means to cause positive needs and natures. So there are exceptions, in other words. Judge Napolitano notes, um, it's not wise for a person, if a defendant goes on a stand in a civil case, I guess he didn't use that word civil in the video I put in the description. But then they could cross-examine him and use things to try to discredit their see. But that's why it's significant evidence is at locations, so they can play and have conscious collusions too with the people seating the juries. They have they already had roles with all names on all sides of the cases, victims, their courts appointed advocates, people in the hallways of the courts, and the courts names themselves, forging, switching names at the same time with the news so no one could have the right thing. Quality of fact, treatment nature. Necessary to counter criminal insidiousness, let alone hyper criminal insidiousness slash criminal insidiousness natures, in other words, being generated from and as rolls with that original breaching method self value. So follow mandated law for them, please. What I said is more important. And they attached me to fake conversations with WFSB, the courts involved, where Connecticut courts and the state judicial branch offices and uses of conjunctions of it, inclusions there are other places exploited also vertically and horizontally for the breaching method way, where it uses confessions also through statements, where it uses the news, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. They use domestic, the charge of domestic and harassment. They have roles with courts putting charges to hide how they were using investigators, and everyone speaking through others' roles with that. Wire crime acts and methods, including with the social media. They replace what's actually recorded, and the big companies aren't going to go in and check those things. These are little rat traps that want to be called rat traps again, because then it makes the person sound guilty. So they've been making the wrong outcomes in cases and using torture methods to pretend and pretending it's about corrections. They've been fabricating, they've been collusions at crime scenes from their own former locations, and that is shown to them when there are means, because there are increasingly means for others to discern that, and they were shown that also preemptively, wherein how they could be motivated good people to be and stay evil, which is one of the things that are also hyper evidentially recorded and relative, where and how the courts failed to bring in the hyper scope of how we have black pupils, whites of eyes, exception nature. And we have hyper evidentially them recorded roles with all sides in criminal and civil cases, news at the same time, roles with the crime scenes. And then with people at other crime scenes and names next to them, they had roles with, including at body dumping spots, including a serial killer from the Britain, a reported convicted serial killer. That guy himself is roles also with the names next to the place, involved with foreign and domestic military families, with the names Demorrow. I'm involved with the FBI director Robert Luskin too, with the names Demorrow, and the names I have involved with wire crimes of the Wethersfield Police, and also with the other police forms at the same time, and the difference between how those same house involved /S with them with that and other natures of predicate acts, have ties to each other and the other people involved, who also increasingly themselves. They're not legitimately with overt criminal enterprises and private ones, if that's what it is. In other words, because they have roles with all sides in criminal civil cases leading up to the World Trade Center attack. They have relative confessions too they left out. And they'll make them to you, the same ones who are pretending other with passions and emotions on Facebook. There is a Leahy family who has their daughter involved with people with upskirt pictures and of other students, also with the school resource officers and their family members involved with sick courts, including probate courts, and sickly distinctly from the superior courts, sickly distinctly from the Connecticut District Court, sickly distinctly from the Ninth Circuit Court in Manhattan, but as people involved with that there too, right before the World Trade Center attack in that context and the ones next to it. This method increasingly uses everyone next to each other because of how it's screening itself. How it, that's one of the things it's doing too, where it's weaponized, where and how anyone who brings up, even if they're a majority of people, how you know what slavery was about trying to do it. Honestly, that body is sensed. What black and white employed by the breaching method, it is easier to discern. It's the human volume system knows the second you hear about the black and white, because we know what black and white is about, and it's not the systems they're speaking about, but pretending other, and they're lying about the causes of it. They're lying about their motivations for that too. So follow mandated law for them, and in other words, get them the one name and sequence. Connecticut interbranch recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed with in other ways also interstates. The judicial branch offices in different courts, too, they have predicate acts methods as an individual branch of government. They have predicate act methods grouped also with the other branches of government and also together. And this is manifest to every modern country, A through Z, to keep names that are incapable of defending themselves and of affording the short words of anyone, anybody, individual, even if a group of nations, if they're going to be a nature that is capable of speaking and trying honestly to figure out how to overcome the impositions it forced, inseparable from all other exceptions, too. What really caused the murders that people commit in New York City? What really sustains that? Follow what I caught them doing with the campuses and with people next to body dumping spots and with killers, how they've been using them too. Here, per them, killers. I never saw the guy kill anyone. In other words, and I know the people next to the spot are involved with predicate acts intercampuses at every campus I went to, and their ties to the people there. And then they get other people they don't know. Oh, no, and everyone's just lying about their motivations. They're just going to make everyone, in other words, they're lying about why they hate me, and what while they tell the truth too. So that's why I get every people on paper. Follow mandated law. Vaccines. Stop leaking things. New Britain Superior Court, Hartford courts are leaking how they, before the World Trade Center attack, they have rolls on off campuses with predicate acts with child offenders. Yeah. These are people involved since before Obama was in office. They have the help of the Democrats and of the Republicans, recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. Like as the news is supposed to help them, they're against them. They have the sources of themselves. Then they're hiding behind trying each other's motivations. They have male and female investigators, sickly, distinctly hurt, so they could use the difference of that to measure and maintain the difference of that self-value by the people hurt sickly distinctly too, because then they can't go back and defend that logic, the nature of logic, and afford discern answers proper for the law. I'm not even a lawyer. We're going to delineate the delusions from their criminally foreign influence, fact, human nature, qualities, aspects. And we're going to use the value only increasing of how and why our founders had to counter extort the other founders, and how and why the Native Americans fighting with the Native Americans enabled this. But only also because the laws were so crazy against everyone that once they forced them just for a short time to do things that were against the law, they had no choice but to stay with our founders. Here, I'll teach you clear. All else tell lies. So they have misinformation. They have real good reasons to need to counter negative value nature progressions, like people putting bad medical information. Then they'll use that and pretend, oh, this person's making up delusions, and they're making up things. They can't go back and defend. That means so that people won't lie about there's a video, I didn't watch it. but it says the most dangerous experiment on the internet, where there's a microwave and you can get electrocuted because certain things hold on to electricity, even once it is separated from the electrical source. In other words, misinformation about that is something we have to counter. We don't have proper that because we have the identities of ground locations, identities of investigations, investigators, titles. Sick. They cannot defend their logic and their value and afford to discern what value is about. Vaccines. I teach us things below. Know how I brought into the counter theater before there was a war, before it was mentioned in the news. Russia and Ukraine, and the roles with syntax, with the Department of Motor Vehicles and the Department of Transportation. They're increasingly involved with these gangs. People pretend they don't know what I'm talking about. Follow mandate law for Weatherfield Police. Pick one name and sequence for them. Have them fear God to pretend lies about my motivations for saying that. And if they're true, because I did do things to make them uh, rightfully, they should have been curious about why I forced people to call the police. Instead of being curious, they hid what I caught them doing by faking conversations with me. And way worse before that and since too. So yes, it's tied to serious things. We went to wars and stuff like that, but that shouldn't mean that you should hide the little simple facts that don't collude with those narratives and natures. Also, the name Sullivan is one of the ones with the Weathersfield Police, with the foreign and domestic military families, Kuwait and their extended family members, Kuwaiti general, extended family members involved with Tonksius Dean, and also another intimate, as reportedly an intimate tie of hers. Then another intimate tie of her, a black Muslim, and both of them have roles keeping what the Quran is about from not discerned, and with the inter campuses, and per a method that pretends people think unlogical things while they're faking transcripts to do it. Totally on campuses filmed 24/7. They're putting fake ties between people, fake natures of ties between people. They have the kids of Dean Alford. Like they have people associated with the Dean Alford on and off campus involved with confessions tied to murders, like and false news associated with it. So it might be the whole thing made up. There's a Greg Kyler, and there are news reports of people tied to him. And there was timed uses of roles with a Dean Alford, with switching names and predicate acts with a Joshua Stryker, who's also one of the ones who pretend to be the fake ties to other people, fake natures of ties to people behind my back, and with people that live in the area. In other words, they spread with the intelligence community criminally foreign influence with these people like these names here, like this Joshua Stryker, who non-verbally confessed, demonstrated, confirmed twice he's involved with sequence shifts, and the day after he makes the confession non-verbally. He has roles with former director of FBI Robert Luskin, with predicate acts with names on and off Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University, leading up to the World Trade Center attack and since. Also with UPS families and post offices tied to him and places next to them. Further involved with whiting forensics through time too. In other words, these are not legitimate people with how they speak for. They need to get new acting coaches too. We need to all learn hyperacting. You have some fake people speaking for culture and using their titles and identities as law bodies. They can't speak for the law. Get down. Ah, follow me to the law for them.